Today's episode is brought to you by Revolut.
In June 1994, loggers began noticing strange lights hovering over the treetops of Phoenix Mountain in Heilongjiang, China. It was seen by more than 50 people, and everyone was confused. So one man decided to investigate. His name was Meng Zhaoguo, and his life was about to change for the worse. Meng invited his nephew, Li, to check out what they believed was a crashed weather balloon. After traveling dozens of kilometers, they finally arrived to the site. But as they approached, Meng realized that it was not a balloon, but something far stranger. He described a smooth, windowless structure supported by a pillar-like base with a semicircular tail resembling painted metal rather than aircraft wreckage. Then, Meng decided to go nearer. As he reached within 100 meters of the strange craft, it suddenly emitted a loud, sharp alarm. He instantly felt intense electric shocks from his belt, his tools, and watch that he was carrying, as if the craft was giving Meng a warning. It was telling him to fuck off. Frightened, Meng and his nephew scrambled down the mountain. But 2 days later, he would return with a group of over 30 people to confirm his find. But this time, he was more cautious. Meng took out a telescope to monitor it from afar. But as his colleagues looked over to Meng, they saw his face drop, and his eyes widen in horror. "What did you see?" they asked. Meng looked over to them and answered, but no one believed him. He later recounted that he did see the big white craft through the telescope, but this time he also saw a humanoid figure standing beside the craft. Ooh. But you know what's scarier than seeing an unknown humanoid figure? Your bank quietly robbing you at the Money Changer, a spread so wide that you can fit the whole Mysteries of Asia episode within it. Which is why this episode is brought to you by Revolut, our longtime partner. Revolut recently improved their already great exchange rates, so you can enjoy even more savings for your upcoming trips. Plus, you can exchange and lock in 39 different currencies directly in their app. Meaning, when you're planning for your next few trips, be it Japan or Korea or Thailand, you can actually lock in all the different currencies in advance without any worries. If say the rates are favorable at the time of your booking. And if you're on the Revolut Metal plan like I am, you get a 1.5% cashback on local spendings. Yes, not just travel. Your shopping and midnight Grab food orders all earn cashback. But what's even better than cashback? As a Revolut Metal user, you get up to $2,000 worth of annual subscription which you can enjoy locally, like Tinder Gold for any of my single Habibis out there, if you decide that 2026 is the year that you emotionally recover. Or don't emotionally recover, I'm not judging. You can always go the fitness route instead. They have Class Pass as well. Or if fitness is not the way, you can go the emo route too. They have NordVPN for accessing as many shows as you want on Netflix across the globe. Or if you want to go the productive route, they have Financial Times, so you can read productive articles instead of doom scrolling. Basically, Revolut is not just a travel card. It's a cashback card and a subscription vault all together at this point. You can get a $50 cashback when you sign up for Revolut and spend once using my description link or scan the QR code somewhere on screen. Limited to the first 200 new signups only. And thank you Revolut for sponsoring today's video. Now back to Meng Zhaoguo. Meng Zhaoguo was an honest and kind man. His colleagues had never heard of him having any bad intentions. But in the summer of 1994, he would become the central figure in what is now known as China's most mysterious alien encounter. His story of lights on the mountain, an otherworldly assault, and even an intimate contact with a 3-meter tall being made headlines across the entire country. And he had physical proof of his encounters. But what I find interesting is that even despite the immense risk and ridicule this experience gave him, he still chose to stick to his word, never profited from it, and continuously kept a low profile. So what exactly happened to Meng Zhaoguo that forever changed his life? Every year during the harvest season, men, women, and children from Hongqi Forest Farm would head up Phoenix Mountain to begin a full day of harvesting. But this season, something unexplainable would happen. In June 1994, more than 50 loggers and farmers saw strange bright lights hovering over the treetops of Phoenix Mountain. They reported that it was as if someone had put a big mirror in the sky and reflected the sun's rays. One female witness asked her father what it was, to which her father replied, "It looks like a huge plastic tent, as big as 3 houses." That's a very big tent. Among the 50 people who saw this strange phenomenon was Meng Zhaoguo, but he had an initial explanation. Meng had previously seen weather balloon wreckage in the mountains before, so naturally he thought this was the same. He invited his nephew-in-law, Li, on this journey to investigate, but little did they know, it was going to be a journey that would spark the greatest UFO story in the country. The two men headed up the mountain carrying tools such as machetes and screwdrivers for disassembling balloons. After a long trek, they arrived at a patch of rocks on a slope, and it was there that they saw a very strange object. The object was large. Its body was milky white with a tinge of yellow. The head of the craft was round, and there was a curved tail. There was another round object in the middle of the body, which was made of a different material and had a metallic reflection. This was the reflection that everyone saw. Meng recalled, "I was about 300 meters away from this thing. My immediate impression was that it was stuck in the rocks of the hillside, with a support pillar coming down from below and propping itself up on the rocks below, with a semicircular tail sticking out from behind. There were no windows or doors, just that bare, slippery thing." When Meng Zhaoguo got about 150 meters away, he recalled that the large object suddenly let out a sharp alarm. Meng was so frightened, he fell to the ground. He then scrambled to his feet and ran towards his nephew, Li. Meng was so shaken, he had to light a cigarette to calm himself down. A few minutes later, Meng wanted to find out more, but his nephew, Li, was deeply frightened and tried to stop him. But Meng ignored him. He took a step closer to the strange object. Then, without warning, a high-pitched whine pierced the air. An invisible jolt of force struck him, throwing him backward. His vision went white with pain, as if needles had stabbed into his eyes. His companion screamed and bolted down the slope. Half-blinded and terrified, Meng stumbled after him. Meng recalled this by saying, "I felt a sudden jolt, or as I would say, an electric shock. I've been shocked with 220 volts before, so I know what it feels like." Then this thing made a sound like a broken car horn. When it made that sound, I was genuinely startled. My heart clenched and I quickly retreated. Some of you may be thinking, but sneaky Sushii, maybe he saw a military aircraft or a helicopter, but that's impossible because the nearest airbase is in Mudanjiang and it didn't have any records of any flight surveys in the area that day. Meng immediately reported the encounter to his supervisors and colleagues, who were all disturbed by the news. So, 3 days later, on the 9th of June, the logging camp decided to organize a search party. Over 30 people from the Hongqi Forestry Farm embarked on this journey, with Meng Zhaoguo taking the lead. When they were about 15 kilometers from where the craft had landed, the men decided to scan the area with their binoculars. The first two men used the binoculars for a while, but neither of them saw anything. But when the binoculars were passed to Meng, something terrible happened. He held the binoculars up with both hands and scanned the area. After 2 or 3 seconds, Meng shouted excitedly, "I see it! I see it!" But before he could finish speaking, Meng collapsed onto the ground. He later insisted that he saw the big white craft again, but in front of it was a humanoid figure standing completely still. But before he could cry out, a beam of light lashed out from the distant figure and struck him square in the forehead. He screamed and collapsed to the ground. Almost everyone who had come with him was stunned. They saw Meng Zhaoguo lying on the ground with his hands tightly clutching the grass around him. He was in immense pain and convulsing. His colleagues began to help him. Some shouted for those in front to stop, while others carried Meng Zhaoguo on their backs and ran to a plastic greenhouse about 100 meters away to provide first aid. Others became even more curious and decided to go up the mountain to see what it was. More than 10 people went up the mountain to search, and that's when they saw some rather peculiar things. Near the ridge, they found a long swath of earth that looked freshly upturned, as if something huge had plowed through it. Whatever had been there was now gone. There were also large boulders that had been overturned and colorful plastic sheets that had never been seen in the forest before. Where did they come from? The men also discovered that there were scorch marks on the nearby rocks and that the trees in the vicinity had abnormal yellowing or blackening. Back at the greenhouse, Meng was suffering tremendously. Someone had found the watch that he had thrown away, but because of his sudden fear of metal, Meng slapped the watch away. He could no longer speak. His tongue was stiff. He then fell into a long-term coma and a semi-mad sleepwalking state for more than a month before he regained consciousness. However, this was only the beginning, as these visitors were not yet done with him. In fact, he was about to have one of the most intimate encounters with an otherworldly being ever recorded. Meng's health and mental state started to deteriorate rapidly. Family members described him waking up in a daze, shaking and crying in the middle of the night, or sometimes even shouting while waving his hands wildly. For days, he suffered headaches, electrical sensations, and moments of vacant staring. Neighbors started to whisper that he had lost his mind. They called him Crazy Meng. But then, one night, still in his semi-conscious state, Meng was jolted awake by an uncanny presence in his bedroom. It began with a weight pressing down on his chest. He awoke to find himself suspended 1 meter above his head. His arms were stretched wide. He was paralyzed. The room was dim and unnaturally still. The air was thick, as though time had suddenly stopped. He shifted his gaze to his side. His wife was still sleeping, undisturbed, but they were not alone. From the far corner of the room, Meng spots a female figure emerging. It was slow, deliberate, and towering, approximately 3 meters tall. The being's body was similar to a human's, except her skin was rough, almost leathery, and covered in patches of coarse, dark hair. Her eyes were oversized, black, and unreadable. Her hands were large, 6 fingers each, and they moved not with curiosity or desire, but with clinical precision. She was dressed tightly, with only her head and lower body exposed. Meng was terrified. He couldn't move or speak. He felt his body exposed, examined, and invaded, not by violence, but by something colder. Procedure. He reported that the being pinned him in mid-air and interacted with him intimately. The encounter lasted seconds, or maybe an eternity, he couldn't tell. Then, the alien injected his thigh with a gun-shaped object. Meng recounted that at the time, his wife and children were lying quietly on the bed, and he was floating above them while all this was going on. That's quite a fantasy to have, if you ask me. And then it was over. She was gone, and he dropped back down to the mattress, as if nothing had happened. But it wouldn't be long before he would see those same large eyes emerge from the darkness again. Just a few days later, still in his semi-conscious state, Meng encountered 2 male figures stepping silently through his wall. They looked similar to the female alien he encountered, only slightly bigger and with the same unreadable eyes. They then took him through the walls of his home, and the next thing he knew, he was standing inside a vast hangar. All around him were dozens of tadpole-shaped saucers, identical to the one he had seen on the mountain. He was then ushered into one of the crafts, where he met an alien that was taller than the others. He assumed it was their leader. The alien leader then held out a glowing cube, and the moment Meng touched it, language flooded in and images began to flash before his eyes. But they weren't memories, they were messages. The alien leader declared to Meng that they had 3 purposes for visiting Earth. The first was to understand and study the planet. The second was to warn humanity that we shouldn't waste energy on war and pay close attention to protecting our environment, or we will suffer the consequences. Their third purpose was to avoid an imminent catastrophe on their home planet of Jupiter. Then came a vision. He saw Jupiter engulfed in a fiery cascade of comets, tearing into its atmosphere and splitting the planet's surface in a violent display. And remember this vision, because it will be important later. Meng then asked if he could see the female being again. Simp. He was denied, but the leader gave him something else. A very strange promise that within 60 years, a child carrying his DNA would be born on another planet. And one day, they said, he would see his offspring. Congratulations, Meng. You are the father of an alien baby. Then Meng blacked out. When he awoke, he was back in his bed. He clearly remembers checking his watch. It was 3:40 a.m. July 17th. In the weeks that followed, as the fog in his mind began to lift, he started speaking, and what he would say would change his life forever. Meanwhile, news of the Phoenix Mountain UFO spread like wildfire beyond the village. By the end of June 1994, local newspapers had run front-page stories on Meng's claims. Reporters descended on the logging camp, desperate to find out more about this remarkable story. Within days, Meng Zhaoguo went from an unknown lumberjack to a minor celebrity who was celebrated by UFO enthusiasts, but also ridiculed by skeptics. Then, Meng began to externalize what he saw by drawing. When people handed him a pen and paper, he started producing sketches. One sketch outlined a craft with a rounded body and sharp protrusions, which looks a bit like a sperm, if you ask me, or a tadpole, depending on how you look at it. And it's interesting to note that Lee, his nephew-in-law, also drew an identical tadpole-shaped craft. Meng also started drawing strange symbols that he claimed were transmitted to him telepathically. He claimed that he couldn't read these symbols, but felt compelled to reproduce them. Believers have stated that it resembled Cyrillic or even Latin letters, and that this is proof of contact, that he really did meet these aliens. Because how could a rural farmer produce these symbols? Believers also point to the fact that 6 days after the incident in the forest, Meng's family noticed a purplish red mark the size of a button on his forehead, conceivably from the beam of light that caused him to collapse. Skeptics say that he could have faked the scar. Possibly, but Meng only has a 5th grade education, and he has absolutely no ability to fake such a convincing scar that lasted for years. He also has another clear scar on his leg, which he claims is from the gun that the female alien injected him with. What's also interesting is that during an investigation session, more than 30 people testified. Witnesses confirmed that they saw a craft that originated from the southeast of Phoenix Mountain, stating that the craft was very bright with a brownish-yellow middle. Witnesses saw it hovering for 3 to 4 minutes. Then, it gradually moved in an up and down motion, heading north and finally disappearing into the sky. So why would dozens of people fabricate the same story? Then came the researchers. One of the first on the scene was Professor Chen Gongfu of Harbin Institute of Technology. He was a scientist who had been tracking UFO reports, and his findings told a deeper story. He states that Meng's description of events matched elements from other abduction cases that he has seen. For example, the blinding beam of light that paralyzed Meng, or the alien's ability to pass through walls to enter his bedroom. Chen Gongfu also found it remarkably hard to believe that a rural man with only a 5th grade education could invent so many details that mirrored global UFO lore. He was convinced that Meng was telling the truth. But the most striking evidence is that Meng knew something that he should never have known. Something that was later proven to be true. Meng claims that during his semi-conscious state in June 1994, the 2 male aliens took him to their leader and showed him a vision of a comet striking Jupiter, the one we saw earlier. And indeed, 1 month later, in July 1994, comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 spectacularly collided with Jupiter. It was one of the most significant astronomical events of the 20th century, and Meng Zhaoguo had witnessed and even predicted it. By the end of 1994, Meng Zhaoguo was no longer just a farmer. He had become a local legend, the man who slept with an alien. And that notoriety came at a steep personal price. Whispers followed him everywhere. Crazy Meng, they would say as they shook their heads. In his conservative village, many considered his outlandish story an embarrassment. The people at the forest farm even joked with Meng, saying, "If you saw a UFO, you should be rich, maybe even worth hundreds and thousands of dollars. But here you are, still a poor farmer." And that's true, because Meng never made a penny from this story. Even when he had plenty of opportunities to do so, he refuted this by saying, "I still want to earn a living with my own 2 hands, not with my mouth." To prove his truthfulness, Meng even volunteered to participate in a lie detector test in Beijing while under hypnosis. He passed the test with flying colors. At home, the atmosphere was equally troublesome. I mean, how would you feel if your partner claimed to have slept with an alien being right beside you while you were asleep? I mean, probably not good, unless you're into that freaky shit. The encounters had also taken a toll on his health, and his wife was left to do the heavy work. She was burdened by work and depression, and unfortunately, she was diagnosed with a terminal illness a few years later. She passed away when she was only in her early 30s. After that, Meng even told relatives to lie that they did not know him, just to keep the prying eyes of the public off of him. So it really seems like he doesn't like the fame and attention from this story. As UFO enthusiasts and journalists move on to the next story, Meng was left in a strange limbo. He still had to earn a living, but working in the same forest had become impossible under the constant gaze of others. So in the late 1990s, with the help of a UFO enthusiast, Meng relocated to the city to take a quiet job in a university cafeteria, effectively exiling himself from Phoenix Mountain. Now, this was a captivating story, but how much of it can we actually verify? Perhaps an extraterrestrial intelligence really did choose an ordinary man for extraordinary contact. But why choose an obscure logger and leave no evidence behind? Skeptics also point out that although Meng passed the lie detector test, it is not admissible as scientific evidence. The conductor of the test, Zhang Jingping, was also said to be compromised as he was not an independent investigator but a UFO enthusiast, so he was already inclined to believe Meng's story. What about the alien spacecraft? Well, the Heilongjiang Science and Technology Association actually sent an investigation team to the village and to the site itself, and they found no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial contact or an alien spacecraft. Their conclusion was skeptical. However, no full report was ever made public. No photograph or artifact ever surfaced from any of Meng's encounters as well, other than the scars on his body, which could be scars that he did to himself. Meng did claim that the aliens covered the wound on his leg with a gelatinous material to heal it faster, but his wife had thrown out that material and it's lost forever. That's very convenient. Officials theorized that Meng could have experienced sleep paralysis or even a hallucination during his semi-conscious state, which led him to imagine this story. Because in the 80s and 90s, China was engulfed in UFO fever. Magazines, TV shows, and club newsletters were spreading stories of flying saucers and alien abductions. Meng could have merely absorbed these ideas subconsciously and later imagined an encounter he thought was real. But hallucinations don't leave physical scars. They also don't get observed by multiple people all seeing the same thing. Some argue that everything is a hoax and Meng Zhaoguo simply made it all up. However, Meng never became wealthy. In fact, his story brought more trouble than reward. Leaders of Hongqi Forest Farm lamented that after Phoenix Mountain became famous, media and research teams descended on the village, expecting free accommodations while contributing nothing in return. The sudden influx strained the tiny village's resources, reportedly consuming hundreds of kilograms of rice along with other substantial expenses. Then, in 2001, the mountain was designated a national forest park. Park contractors leaned into the legend, advertising it as a site of China's first human-alien romance. They even built a hotel, which is said to be doing very well. It attracts a large number of tourists and outdoor enthusiasts. Meng could have easily collaborated with these organizations to make a fortune, but he didn't. If he's doing this for money, I mean he's doing a pretty damn bad job. Meng was quoted saying, "Once, humans believed that the earth was flat. Humans, if we have never seen something with our own eyes, naturally doubt that it exists, or that life could be that way. I was the first to be brave enough to say, I saw that." I think Meng Zhaoguo truly believes his story, and I believe that something strange did happen in the forest in June 1994. There are just too many witnesses to deny it. But I also think that because of multiple retellings from multiple sources that span multiple years, details of the story have been exaggerated or even misremembered, either by the villagers or by Meng himself. Memory is very fallible, and what we recount is often just a memory of our previous retelling, not the actual event itself. But I can't help but wonder how many of these alien encounter stories are actually real, but no one believes them, no matter how hard they try to convince others, and how many are keeping information in the dark in fear of ridicule. Would I tell anyone if a giant alien lady invaded my room? Probably to my inner circle, perhaps, and maybe I'll even leave a clue in one of my YouTube videos as well. So my question to you is, would you say anything? Thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you like strange and mysterious stories from Asia, consider subscribing to view our future videos. This was a very fun video to research. And if you guys have any other stories you want me to investigate or cover, leave your ideas in the comments. Also, thank you to Revolut for sponsoring today's video. You can get a $50 cashback by signing up with Revolut with the link in the description, limited to the first 200 new signups. And I'll see you guys next week. Peace.